After realizing through extensive research that the Quran was the only book to have given a clear answer to this enigma, Dr. Bucaille pronounced the Shahada and became Muslim. So, how did all this start? And what did he discover on the pharaoh's body? How is his discovery related to the Quran until he was convinced that Islam is the truth? Stay with me as I tell you the amazing story of this eminent scientist who converted to Islam thanks to what he discovered while analyzing the mummy of Pharaoh Ramses II. Born in France, he was a professional doctor and a specialist in the field of gastroenterology. In 1976, then French President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing convinced his Egyptian counterpart Anwar Sadat to temporarily let the mummy of Ramses II come to France for intensive care and restoration to fully health. French President promised Egyptian President that Ramses would be received with a reception fit for a king. When a French military transport plane bearing the remains of Pharaoh, who died 3,200 years earlier, touched down at Le Bourget Airport in Paris, the red carpet had been rolled out. The Republican Guard were standing to attention, and a delegation led by a government minister was waiting to greet him. Dr. Maurice Bucaille was then appointed as the senior surgeon and scientist in charge of the restoration of the body of Ramses II. While the processors were busy making restoration to the mummy, their head, Maurice Bucaille, was thinking otherwise. As he put it in his 1987 book entitled Mummies of the Pharaohs, Modern Medical Investigations, Dr. Bucaille was trying to find out how this pharaoh had died. While analyzing him, he discovered that the remains of salt stuck in his body were clear evidence that he had drowned, and that his body had been retrieved from the sea soon after he drowned. It was also clear that they had rushed to mummify his body so that it would remain intact. This pushed Dr. Bucaille to ask himself this question: how did this body, to the exclusion of other mummified bodies of the pharaohs, remain so intact when it had been recovered from the sea? Maurice Bucaille was in the process of writing his final report on what he considered to be an unprecedented discovery, that is, the recovery of the body of Ramses II from the sea and his immediate embalming after his drowning, when one of his colleagues whispered in his ear the following: "Don't rush to write this report. This discovery is not new because Muslims already talk about the drowning of Pharaoh from their sacred book, which not only relates the story of the drowning of Pharaoh, but also the fact that his body will be preserved in good condition long after his drowning." However, Dr. Bucaille absolutely refused to believe this statement because he was convinced that this type of discovery was only possible thanks to advanced scientific knowledge and ultra-precision machines. Is it believable that Muhammad knew this information more than 1,000 years ago, while I have only just learned it? He wondered. He got more surprised and kept on asking, where did the Muslims' Quran quote these data from, while the mummy was not discovered until 1898, about 200 years only, given that the Quran has been recited by Muslims for over 1,400 years, and given also that until a few decades ago, the entire mankind, including Muslims, did not know that the ancient Egyptians had mummified their pharaohs? Dr. Bucaille stayed up all this night gazing at Pharaoh's body, thinking deeply of what his fellow researcher told him about the Muslims' Quran, explicitly establishing that this body was recovered after drowning, while the Bible narrated only the story of Pharaoh when he was chasing Prophet Moses, without mentioning the fate of his body at all. Is it believable that Muhammad knew about this over 1,000 years ago, while I have only just known it? He thought. The French government sent back the mummy to Egypt in a splendid glass coffin, but since he knew about the stories circulated by Muslims on the intactness of this body, Dr. Bucaille decided to pack his baggage and travel to Saudi Arabia, where a medical conference happened to be held with hundreds of Muslim scholars in the field of anatomy attending. There he told them about his discovery that Pharaoh died drowned in the sea and that his body was kept intact. One of the conferees opened the Quran and read out the ayah in which Allah Almighty said, "So today we will save you in body, that you may be to those who succeed you a sign, and indeed many among the people of our signs are heedless." Quran 10:92. Hearing this, Dr. Bucaille stood before the attendants very excited and loudly said, "I have converted to Islam and believed in this Quran." After reverting to Islam, he spent 10 years devoting himself exclusively to studies aimed at demonstrating that the Quran is consistent with modern scientific theories. Maurice Bucaille drew from these long years of research a book on the noble Quran that shook Western countries, just as it greatly destabilized the scholars of those countries. With the title of the book reading, "The Bible, the Quran and Science, the Holy Scriptures examined in the light of modern knowledge," the book quickly became a great success, and from its first edition, it was sold out in all bookstores. Then it was reissued a second time in more than 100,000 copies, and then it was translated from French into different languages, which allowed the message to be spread to the four corners of the planet. However, some among non-Muslims and atheist scholars who decided to remain in their blindness, despite having discovered the truth, tried to denigrate Dr. Bukaile's book by criticizing it subjectively. One of them was undoubtedly a certain Dr. William Campbell, who tried to attack Bukaile's work, but despite his efforts and verbal gesticulations, he was unable to come up with solid facts to dismantle the powerful argument of Dr. Maurice Bucaille. But what is most interesting in these vain attempts at denigrating is that some Western scientists who were determined to attack Dr. Bukaile's book changed their attitude as they read it and studied it in depth. Some of them even ended up publicly embracing Islam. Allah says in the Quran that for a person to believe in Allah, one sign is enough, and for a person who has decided to remain in darkness, even millions of signs are not enough. Quran 6:109.